I decided to do a short video on simple aquariums, and for some of you beginners out there, give you some cool tips to keep you from getting in over your head. This is an Eclipse System 12, probably 10 or 15 years old. I mean, I got them when they first came out, and this is probably my 5th or 6th aquarium, and I was interested in keeping it simple and having success without a whole lot of extra work. So if you'll see, there's a simple timer on the wall right below that night light that turns the light on and off every day for approximately 11-12 hours, depending on how much ambient light comes in the room where you set your aquarium. Don't ever put your aquarium in direct sunlight. That's a bad idea. Got a little stand to keep my stuff underneath. I don't really have a lot of extra stuff. I can't imagine I've got 200 bucks, maybe 250 bucks. I went on this aquarium, kept a stock light. I've added a heater in the back, which is a little larger than you really need, but I keep a heater in there, keep the temperature at 78 all the time. I've got a fine black sand that I chose. I rinsed really good and put it in there. And if you actually look, if you want to get kind of advanced, there's even a little bit of anaerobic bacterial filtration going on in the bottom layers of that, as long as you don't really disturb it or play around with it. It's kind of tricky to see, but there's a layer just down in there deep, and there's a little bit of a wash mound there coming off my filter off the top. There's currently three silver dollars in there. They're probably 1.5 years old maybe. Keep a little thermometer in there. Got a real piece of driftwood. Those are actually fake plants. You can buy matted plant, like a carpet almost, and then you can kind of aquascape it and shave it with a pair of scissors and kind of get a contour to it a little bit, mount it up on the bottom of the aquarium, and then fill the sand in around it. It's been in there from the day I got it, so it's probably 10 years old. So I leave a little bit of the natural algae and stuff kind of grow on it, and actually there's a little bit of algae growing on the glass right there, a little brown algae coming from that light, and I've got to clean that maybe once every 2 weeks or so, but it's pretty minimal. That's a good thing. You want a little bit of algae in there. It tells us that your water chemistry is pretty good. If you've got excessive algae, you're probably not changing your water enough, or not keeping the water clean, overfeeding, something like that. These guys get fed about once a week, a small amount of food, very small, just a pinch. Most of it never gets to the ground. If there's food in your gravel and stuff, you're going to have a lot of problems. You can't let the food get down into the gravel, and that's just going to create issues. So it's going to rot down there, and it's even worse than the poo that the fish put out. It's just rotting fish food is bad. So of course that's a fake plant as well. And then there's a tall kind of plant laying up towards the top. It's also fake and trimmed. It was probably about twice that big. It's slowly kind of rotting off in the UV light, and little pieces break up, and I kind of throw it away as it goes. So of course the aquarium's got its pickup back here in the back corner. You set your filter on freshwater tanks. You probably want to pick up the water sort of from the bottom. Saltwater tanks, they try and gather it up from the top. So, but freshwater tanks are okay to pick up down near the bottom there. You always have a pickup there so your fish don't get stuck inside. And if you want to take a peek on what's inside the lid, everything is self-contained on these units. I would definitely recommend this type of aquarium for a beginner. The Eclipse systems are really, really easy to get at. See if I can get some light in here. And there's a pump bringing water up, and I'm running across a filter mat. I probably change that filter mat once every 3 months, depending on how bad it gets. And then there's a bio wheel, which I believe is part of the major success of this system. You don't never touch it. It's 10 years spinning just like that. Don't touch it. Never take it out. Never clean it. Leave it alone. Underneath this mat, there's some extra space. I have a little bag of carbon that I just took an old filter bag and threw, a cup full of carbon in it, rinsed it out real good, and dropped it underneath there, just for a little extra buffer. When I change this pad, it leaves some bacteria and stuff on the inside that can keep picking up the work until the new filter pad gets acclimated to the system. So you never want to do too much at once. You never want to change the filter, clean the aquarium, do all that stuff all at once, like one big day, do all your cleaning. That's bad news. You want to do a little here, a little there, and let the system adjust slowly to small changes instead of one big change. That's just going to, again, create problems. If you kind of look in here, got funny green stuff growing. There's actually little critters in there. I don't know if we can zoom in and see if we can see any of these little critters that kind of tend to be wandering around in that stuff. I mean, there's little itty bitty pin size critters in there, and I imagine some of them fall in the water and the fish eat them, and I just leave it alone, man. It's natural. It's a system. You leave it alone. That's part of the filtration. There's some kind of growing back that way, and little green. Leave that stuff in there. That works. So it's nice and quiet. Don't let the water level get down too low. Don't ever clean it with bleach or Windex. This is an acrylic tank, so you got to be really clean, or careful about what you clean with. You don't ever want to use any kind of anything that's going to scratch it or anything. I have one of those little magnet kind of glass cleaners that somebody gave me the other day, and from another project, and that's how she goes. So like I said, I feed once a week. You could probably feed twice a week or 3 times a week without any problems at all. If you're feeding 2 or 3 times a day and you don't know what you're doing, I mean, if you're not been building aquariums for 5 or 7 years, you're really going to have problems. You can't do that. You've got to just be real sparing. They got little itty bitty stomachs. Those fish aren't that big. In retrospect, there's my hand. I mean, if my finger's that big and his stomach can't be the size of a pin, 2 pieces of food is going to fill him up. So if you put 50 pieces of food in there, you're putting 47 pieces of food in your dirt. You know, and if they're not able to catch it, then they're not that hungry. My fish, as soon as it hits the water, it's gone. They inhale it. And like I said, those are a year and a half old probably. So I keep some real simple stuff underneath the aquarium here. Got an assortment of food. We've got some flakes, some crab pieces. I haven't used these since the day I got them probably. Extra charcoal, a little bit of aquarium salt I put in there. That's kind of something you don't need to do, but it's something I had. And a couple extra, I got these little micro pellets that are actually for betas, and those are really kind of nice. They float real well. Food that floats on the top is easier because, again, it doesn't get down into the rocks, so it gives a fish a better chance. If it sinks right to the bottom, unless you got a catfish or something like that, it's going to weed in there and get it out. It's probably just going to rot and cause problems. So I actually have a test kit for those people that are a little bit more interested in what's going on in this aquarium. I keep a logbook underneath here of exactly. I try and test my stuff every time I do a water change, which is about once a month. Whenever the water starts to get low in there, I test it. As long as the parameters are good, I add water. If the parameters are bad, I do a water change and add water. So I know my pH is pretty consistent. We stay around 7.2 or so with the tap water I got here. Good water. I've got nitrates at about probably 40 parts per million. That's pretty good for a freshwater tank that's not getting, you know, crazy changes and not a high fish load. I mean, everybody wants 0 and all this and all that, but this is a freshwater tank, and these fish really don't care that much. So they're pretty good if as long as it's testing really low on the scale. 0 nitrates, 0 chlorine, all that kind of stuff. So I got a under-the-counter water filter kind of thing like you use for your freezer that I run my water through before I give it to the fish. Don't pour it straight out of the tap. It's got chlorine in it, and that can cause problems. So yeah, this is a long old tank. She's been moved to several houses. She's been left alone. Don't put your hands in the tank. Keep them out of there. You're just going to introduce problems. Don't stir it up. Don't screw around with it. I don't vacuum the gravel. I like the finer gravel because anything that sits on the top will kind of tumble across eventually and kind of get back to the corner back there. I like it. Sort of looks natural. I've had as many as maybe 15 or 20 fish here at a time, but currently these 3 guys are Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and they sort of like it in there. So they don't seem to want anybody, so we'll leave them alone. And if you flip around, you'll see exactly what this hobby turns into. That's a big 90-gallon reef tank somebody gave me for free, and I'm just trying to decide. It's my white plastic shark, whether I want to put fish in it or flowers. You know, fish in that big of a tank, that's a lot of work. You end up with a whole bunch of stuff, you know, buckets and filters and bits and pieces, and that's really just as relaxing to look at as the one on the other side right there is. So you just end up with a whole lot of work. I'm trying to decide if I'm going to stand it up like this and drill the holes and do the filters the way I want, or just stick with Old Faithful over there. All right, it's a fun hobby. Definitely got to get into it if you got a little bit of time. Just think about it and enjoy.